Welcome to the Creative Industry Insight podcast, a podcast that takes a look at various roles in the creative world. I'm your host, Bobby. Today's guest, Mel Jones, who's a production designer, joins us to talk about her latest project, Bill and Ted Face the Music. Please be warned, there are heavy spoilers in this episode, so make yourself comfortable as we jump into the conversation with Mel. Hi, Mel. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
No, I'm really happy that you managed to reach back out to me after you contacted you, and I'm really happy you can sit down and talk about the new Bill and Ted. I saw the film last night, really enjoyed it. It was a really good palate cleanser to what's happening at the moment, and a very big shift change to what I've been watching. So no more like serial killer documentaries or anything like that. It was just
I've been watching a few of those recently too, so yeah.
Yeah, I think what's the thing I've seen recently? I've recently rewatched Zodiac because I was listening to a podcast about it, and it's one of those where it's like the boogeyman's real, but he was never caught, so it's even scarier to think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But let's jump straight into talk about Bill and Ted and not Zodiac, because you're the production designer on the film. And I guess we should start with, how did the project come about? And when you first read the script, do you start writing ideas down, or do you let the ideas germinate after a couple of reads?
Okay, so part one, I got a call from my agent saying they want to see you for Bill and Ted. It's Alex Winter's fault. I production designed the Smosh movie for him, a little YouTube movie 5 years prior to. And so when Bill and Ted came around, he suggested to Dean Pariseau, the director, and Scott that they may want to interview me for it. So I got the call, kind of freaked out a little bit, super excited, and went in and got the job. Reading the script, what happens to me when I read a script is I actually see the movie play out in front of my eyes when I'm reading it. So that's just the way my mind works. When I go in for an interview, I will pull tons, maybe hundreds of research images. And I usually build like a document or a web page so that I can kind of say, this is sort of what I'm seeing. Here's an option. You could do this with it, or you could do that. That's really funny. Like when I read the script, I saw Death's House as a mid-century modern, and I brought that to the project. I just thought it would be funny. It would be like his midlife crisis pad, So I do that, and then so I have visuals when I'm doing the interview, and I can go, I thought maybe this or maybe that, and what, this kind of thing, and it gives us all something to look at. I mean, obviously, with my job, you're responsible for the aesthetic and the visual. Picture's worth more than 1,000 words often. And it's best, I think, to just do it that way. So, we see the same thing.
Because you were saying as well, you'd come up with all these ideas and you'd bring it to the director. When you're having that first interview, do you let the director sort of say what he has in mind, and then you basically say, well, this is what I prepared earlier? Or do you just go in sort of thinking, kind of guns blazing and being like, okay, I reckon this should be this, that, X, Y, or Z?
I go in guns blazing, but I'm not saying there's only one way to do it. I usually say, this was my first impression, but here's a couple options too, and what are you thinking? Because it's certainly, even though I'm responsible for guiding the aesthetic of a movie, it's always collaborative. And there's two things that I'm honoring. I'm honoring the script, and I'm honoring the director's vision. So obviously I want to know what he or she saw. And, more often than not, you're on the same page. And that's why they hire you. But, even given that, that doesn't necessarily mean that's what we end up with. Because, once you start on a job, there's definitely an evolution that happens given all the factors and the complexities of moving. So, like in this case, I brought the mid-century idea to the film, and the guys all liked it. They thought it was really funny. So that's what we went with. I definitely did not plan on building that freeway, but we ended up there because it was just really hard to find a location in New Orleans. So, stuff happens, and you need to be flexible. And it isn't just about what I initially see. I mean, there's, like I said, there's a script, there's a director, there's input. Sometimes the actors even, have a point of view about it. And you just want to tell the best story that you can tell.
When you're reading the script and having it play out in front of you, does the blocking play a part in what comes up with the ideas that you put pen to paper with?
Yeah, sure. I mean, film scripts are really surprisingly thin in terms of description in a certain way, but they're very, what do I want to say? I mean, it's not like reading a book, right? But a well-written script, the important stuff that you need to get out of the script is in there. It plays out in front of me because that's just the way that I think, I guess. That's just an initial response to reading the script. Then I will start doing research where I'm pulling images that speak to what I read or what I saw. And when you're in the process of doing that, I definitely consider the blocking. I used to design for theater, and I used to be a dancer and a choreographer. So I'm very aware of the physical space that I'm creating for people to move in, and talk a lot to the director about how they want to approach that. It's an integral part of it. And sometimes that'll be in the script very literally, particularly if it's a complex scene, like if there's some kind of action or there's stunts or there's, maybe a prop or something very key that they really need to describe what happens to that thing. But, at least more often than not, it's just, Bill walks into the room, he talks to Samantha, they have a drink, something happens, and it's very broad and in a way almost vague. And then we come together and get into the specificity of it as we're developing it on the film. But I definitely will see it when I'm reading it, even though it's vague. Like I see him, I see her, I see the room. I usually see the color. I see a lot of the detail. And so I can bring that to the production, and I just consider that a jumping off point. Sometimes it's the end result. It just happens to be the right thing, but sometimes it's not. Like in the case of this, again, the mid-century modern ended up being what I saw, what I drew. We all liked it, thought it was funny. There wasn't a ton of adjustments on it, and we made that happen. The hologram room where we meet lovely Dennis, the robot, that was something that went through several iterations to get it to be what it was. It was, didn't have a lot of screen time, but it ended up being complicated because we were talking about the future, and we were talking about future technology, and how the one thing that Dean Parasote had said is, I want that room dark. I want a contrast between the hologram so we can really see what they're seeing and then the surrounding. But what is that room? How much gack and junk and screens and, gadgets and things would these people in the future have? I mean, so it was a long conversation. No, they wouldn't have a lot of stuff. What could this place possibly be? I ended up designing it just sort of like a hydro power station thing, simple, very simple, because who's to say that these people in the future aren't telepathic practically? Who knows, right? We didn't want to lock ourselves into something that was too grounded and concrete outside of the robot itself and outside of what you see in the hologram itself. I just had to create this environment. So that was discussions and trying one thing and trying another thing and finally landing on something that really worked,
It's interesting that you mentioned about the futures, because I guess with a film like this, when you have things going into the past and also being in the present and maybe slightly a little bit into the future in terms of a couple of years, I guess the research is quite easy to do because it's all online, isn't it? It's all, you can literally Google how did the house look in 1920s,
Oh yeah.
and
Yeah.
there you've got an endless supply. But when it came to designing the future and the various bits that went with it, and top of the sort of like, I guess it's the war room where they have the holograms, what was the point of sort of, what was like the design process and reference point for what you wanted the future to look like?
Well, I have to credit Dean Pariseau, the director, a lot, because when he knew he wanted to use Calatrava architecture, and particularly his buildings in Spain. Kind of read on the script, it read as very modern and futuristic and light and bright, and that fell into it really worked for the story. And so that was his vision. And the above world was somewhat minimal for me. It was really just creating areas that the actors would interface with. And then a lot of it was CG. So, we thought it was funny because there's a lot of water there. Like, why is there water in San Dimas? Because San Dimas is a desert. But if you look at this landscape, it's all water. So, are we talking global warming? I don't know. It's kind of that kind of thing. And then, as you called it, the war room, which is a great name for it, what is that? And to me, that was the dark underbelly of this, more advanced technology. You assume they're more civilized. It's kind of a higher functioning, they float. But, they still have weapons, and they still, there's this room, and they've made this they've made this robot to murder Bill and Ted, and it's pretty ugly. And so it's kind of like the dark underbelly of that. And that's the funny of it. It's the truth of it.
But that's the sort of theme that does run through Bill and Ted, that there is certain, I guess in each film, there is always a darker sort of underbelly of this sort of peaceful and amazing place. It escapes you from the first one, but in the second one, when you got the robots, and I don't know the actor's name, but he was in Mighty Ducks, the guy who owned the shop. I can't remember his name, but I can picture his face right now, and he's the bad guy in the second one. And that's always sort of a theme that runs through with it. But then as well, the iconic phone booth comes back as well. Did you go by original designs, or did you slightly remodel it?
No, I mean, we rebuilt it. We built that. We had a couple of them that we built from scratch, but I did not redesign that. I didn't want to redesign it. I thought it was really crucial that it was as accurate to the previous. I mean, it would be pointless and rude, quite frankly, I think, and hurtful to people. I mean, I hate that when you see a sequel and they redesign something that fundamentally, everybody knows what it looks like, and fans always get mad. And I did not want to go there. I don't need, you know what I'm saying? It's like we didn't, plus there was the pod, Kelly's pod, and that was a whole endeavor in it, that. So, I got lots of time to think about that and figure that one out. Let's let the phone booth be familiar, be what it was. Absolutely.
Yeah, why fix something when it's not broken?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it would have made me mad. I thought it was funny. The idea of the phone booth in the first two films was great.
I think it's just such a simple idea, but then it's also, if you put it in today's world, I think there'll be certain kids that will have no idea what a phone booth is, or the phone banks and stuff. So I guess that's also a nice, a little more comedic thing for younger audiences to be like, well, why a phone booth? What a random thing. And you mentioned as well Kelly's pod. It kind of reminded me a little bit of this sort of Google Nest, the sort of very circular and very sort of smooth looking. When you were designing that sort of the pod, was there an idea already installed in the script of how it looked like, or was it just sort of here's certain examples, go crazy?
Yeah, I mean, it was just this futuristic looking thing that shows up. It was, the description of it was more about the movement, that it would drop in or drop out, how it came and went, and that it was super futuristic. there was a couple things that happened with that. Like when I first got on the film, there was some designs that we threw around, and we landed on sort of an egg shape. And when I got to New Orleans, because we couldn't really find a good freeway, actual real location to shoot the freeway scene, we ended up building it. And that became a significantly bigger job for my construction department, significantly. And I can talk more about the process of that. But what that led me to do, I was kind of like, well, let me see if I can find something that already exists that we could use for this pod, or would be a simple modification, because they have so much extra work to do now. So I took a weekend and just started researching on the internet, and went down this rabbit hole that, leads you to a million different places. And it was like, I think I started with isolation booths that now they have in offices. So, you can go into this booth. It's like a phone booth. You can talk on your cell phone and have a private conversation. And then I started looking at showers. There's some really incredible, like weird space age showers with weird buttons and light up things. And they're super groovy. And finally I found this meditation pod, and it essentially, and we contacted the company. Dean really liked it. We loved the shape of it. And they sent us one, and theirs was made of really heavy felt and ribbing. And all we did was get rid of the felt and put like a smooth plastic flexible surface on it and painted it. But it essentially is that shape, and the pod, the doors and everything, the inside, the lighting, all that came. And I thought it ended up looking really great. So, and that's movie making. I mean, that was a fix. Like this wasn't Batman, it was this huge budget film. We had enough, but we had to watch our pennies. And, and like I said, the freeway issue came up, and my construction crew was like building a freeway. And so that was the solve.
Was the freeway idea always there in the script, or was that decided later on?
No.
And you're saying as well that the constraints of designing it, were you worried that you weren't going to put it off?
No, I mean, the freeway was always in the script. That was the location that the ending took place. And I went out to New Orleans early, and I looked at a couple of different actual freeway options. And, each one had very significant restrictions. Sometimes it was sound. Sometimes it was how long or can we close this down for? I mean, that final scene, I think, was 4 or 5 days of shooting. So you're going to own someplace for a while. And it just wasn't possible to really shut down any of the physical places that we could have shot it at. And our soundstage used to be, it's a big box store. It used to be an old Lowe's, a hardware store. And I believe we were shooting in the lower Ninth Ward, and I believe it was damaged during Katrina and not reopened after. And, big box stores have big parking lots, huge parking lots. And I remember standing in the parking lot, kind of looking around and, sort of going, could go that way, or we could build a freeway here. And that's what started the conversation. And because we could control it, we're not out in public, just all of the things, we agreed to do it. But it was a huge set. It's about the bottom third of the frame when you see it in the film, and part of the point. So it's the overpass and the Pasadena sign, and both sides of the freeway, and the bases of all those tall pillars that are holding up the ramps, and a junkyard over there, and the billboards with where did they go in the earlier movies? It's not 7-Eleven, it's the other one. Anyway, so just all that stuff. It was all that stuff. And so that you could, for a good portion of that very long scene, we could be in actual real physical environment. If you're on the ground or they're up on that truck on the stage, everything you see pretty much is what we built. but it's just for the wide shots, you know, the establishing of like Saturn coming up and all that kind of stuff. Then they could visual effects it. And that's how we dealt with it. And yes, I thought we could pull it off. Absolutely. It's not a complicated design. A freeway is a freeway is a freeway. It was just how and what do you make it of, and how soon do we put it up or actually shoot it, because, you know, hurricanes and, you know, things of that nature. And every day in New Orleans, sometime between like 1 and 5 in the afternoon, it pours rain for about 20 minutes. And, you know, it's a crazy place to shoot. And we were shooting that scene at the end of August, extremely hot, extremely humid. And we all thought we were crazy, and we were. But you just do it and go for it. And we got it done, and we made a freeway. It was pretty awesome.
It's cool to see at the end of as the climax of the film. I guess audience members hear this rather than see this, but the way that you're explaining as well, just how you lit up with your idea and explaining it, is really nice to see. Just to it shows how passionate you were to nail that idea, and it does look cool. I'm guessing your experience on the dirt as well, because that had probably a lot of big stage sets as well, probably helped quite a lot in the way that you staged the scene. And it does look cool. There is loads of things going on, because I did read that you built your own one, but then also the placement of all the trucks, of how trucks, the cars, I guess the set dressing of it as well played a really important part in making it look good. I guess that leads me on to the next question, in terms of when you're doing your research, what's the most unexpected thing that you had to research or found along the way?
Unexpected. I mean, you know, I did a lot of research on lava rock, stuff like that, to really lock down the geology of hell so that we could create that look. You know, I had sculptors creating these rock towers and structures, and I think that was probably the most fun. I don't know that it was unexpected necessarily. Like I don't know that there was anything that was too unexpected on this job. I mean, there was lots of nice surprises. I mean, deciding to build the freeway was unexpected, certainly, and huge. Yeah.
So you're technically an expert now in like volcanic rocks and everything. So if I did a little quick pop quiz, you might be able to answer everything.
No way. There's no way. It's just all visual for me. I don't remember what anything's called, ever. I just go, oh, that's a cool lava rock, and look at the surf, you know, look at that, and look at this lava field, and look at, you know, this person's. I also referred to a lot of paintings, new and old, of hell. Yeah, they go to hell, I think, in the second film. I mean, I think they went maybe in all three. I don't remember. And
in the second one, they definitely do.
Yeah, and their hell was gray, and the lighting was very red. And one of the things that we talked about a lot and addressed in this film was, what is the evolution? Like, we don't want to divorce ourselves from the past, that it's essential and important. You know, the phone booth is a good example of that. But the guys are much older, and a lot has happened. And I kind of felt like I wanted, you know, that in terms of the whole look of the film, it's a little bit more mature. They're more mature, so let's reflect that, and particularly let's reflect that in their house and their surroundings. And, you know, it's a bit drab. You want to set a mood. Things aren't going so great. So, you know, the earlier part of the film is not super colorful. And then as we evolve, you know, we go to other time periods and stuff like that, it kind of gets more broad in terms of the look of it. But we're starting in a moment, and I think drab is a good word for it. So looking at hell, I was thinking, well, I think I want it to be a little bit more serious feeling, because there's a lot at stake. They get murdered or commit suicide to go down and save their daughters, right? And I wanted to add in the rock and roll element. So I kind of was like, I want it black. I want it dark and black. And I want the rocks to feel like imposing. And so there was we worked on a lot of samples and figuring out what that looks like without it being, you know, horror movie stuff. You know, it's still a comedy, and finding the balance in terms of the geology and the lava, and how the lava, there's cracks in the rock and how it runs through, so it was a lot of playing around with stuff. But for me, in a certain respect, the funnest part of the film, sure, because it's just fantasy, 100% fantasy.
I really like that answer there, because you delved a lot more into it. And it's a good understanding as well that even though you're building these sets and, it's cool that you're going to have this color here, this color there, you also still have to look at the little details that maybe sometimes audio members do not see, but
Yeah.
you still want to make it as great as possible. And because you're a creator of worlds and you want to be respectful to the previous films, as you mentioned as well, that you've slightly matured the look of the film. Is there stuff that you went back to from previous films that influenced your ideas? And what did you add to the film to have that Mel Jones, seal of approval?
Well, I mean, obviously the Wild Stallions, one of the most direct things was the garage, because that was very specific in their early movies and a key kind of meeting point for them. So, I mean, I think this would be a good place to talk about how we sort of created the fusion and showed the evolution. They have houses next to each other. We go into one of the garages, and it definitely has elements from the past. There's Wild Stallion logo and some equipment and things like that are familiar or have a look of the earlier films, but it has been taken over by family. The girls are in there a lot. So we added, an add-on was like an extensive vinyl collection. You can see it stacked up and, kind of set up in a way that it's not just about the guys jamming. There's listening happening. I think there's laundry in there. I mean, there's all this stuff going on that talks about where they are now in their lives. They're not too young, kind of studs rocking out. They are married men and they have children and, responsibility, and they still have a love for the music, and they still have a place to go to kind of try and work on it and get inspired, but, they share it. It's not just theirs, it's everybody's now. And I think that was, kind of the idea of the whole movie. The thing that's so great about it is that, Alex and Keanu really understand the characters. Dean mentioned the first rehearsal that they had, and they were just right back in it. And their rapport with each other as these characters, and also because they are close and friends outside, is great. There's a lot of playfulness, but they just simply are older. And that in itself is a real gift. Like, it's not different actors. It wasn't even really, other than we find them where they are in their lives and they're not doing great, and it's kind of pathetic where they're playing and what's going on, which was all in the script. We all got it. I mean, it wasn't too tough to carry over what we needed from the past, but let them be who they are in the moment.
No, it's cool to see as well. You're mentioning that when they got back into character, that it was just like they'd never left. But then also on top of that is, like, even though the people on screen haven't grown up, but you've created a world around them that's basically just like, actually you're starting to add things that are gonna make things differently. So I guess in the previous films where they're in the garage, it was literally just the instruments and the flag of saying Wild Stallions. And then now you've just added, like, I guess, a whole nother character to what's going on. There is a number of scenes as well where green screen is used. And I'm curious to know, does that affect your designing? Because having green screen, you can manipulate it more to what you want it to look like. Or did it hinder the design process?
No, not at all. I mean, it doesn't hinder it. You definitely take things into account. Our goal, I set the design tonally for hell and, the architecture of the freeway, based on what it looks like in Los Angeles. So I'm creating sort of the base palette. I'm responsible for that. And then working out the details of how much are we going to create 3D real life, get it in camera, and then how much are we going to leave till later? And what does the big picture of later look like? Like we had a really good idea of what, I did the basic design of, say, some of the stuff in hell, like the stairs to the big gate, or walking up to the pit and finding, everybody in the pit. So I built the pit, and I built the surface of the ground, and I built the rocks and some of the walls that were around them. But, like all of those vistas are visual effects. And they did some early test stuff. I draw the stuff 3D, send it to them. They drop in other stuff. So we kind of knew we're working together and knowing how much we wanted to get in camera. And that was important, for a number of reasons. It's important for budget. I don't think that we wanted visual effects on every shot and every scene. That's a lot of time and money in post. And they wanted to, there are sweet spots where we really felt like, and Dean felt like it was going to be really great to have this look. But, for all sorts of stuff, you just don't, like particularly all the scenes on the ground and the freeway and those interactions, everybody talking, you don't want to have to visual effect all that stuff. So let's create a real environment. It was fun. I mean, to me, I love my job, and it's a challenge, and it's, in some ways, the more challenges you have, the more fun it is. You got to figure it out. Like I know what it's going to look like. I have an idea. I know what I want it to look like, but then the challenge is getting that out. And if it's, how do you create enough of environment so that the visual effects guys later can, expand on that and make it better? I mean, they did an incredible job. And I talked to them a lot when we were shooting, like, what do you think of this? Is this going to be something good for you to have to reproduce? And then to Dean and Ed, is this funny? And then, is this logistically, will this work well for the scene and how you're going to shoot it? It's all that kind of, it's really complicated, and it's a whole lot of fun to me. Just all of it. The challenges are sometimes the best part. And I can't think of a specific thing. I'll think about that. But often those kind of challenges will inform me, and I will make certain decisions that make the set better. Necessity is the mother of invention often, and it can be the mother of creativity too. So
those last minute decisions always sometimes pan out quite well. But then, is that something that happens to you? Is that something that happens a lot whilst you're on set, that you need to make these sort of quick snap decisions on how things look? Or do you give yourself a moment to step away to make sure that what you choose serves the project?
Well, I mean, if you're talking about when they're actually shooting, quite honestly, I'm not around enough. I leave that to the on-set dresser, the director, and the DP, and they, I may announce that some choice might be better than another in terms of, logistics or reset time or things like that. But I try and provide an environment that allows them to be flexible. And earlier in my career, I wasn't always a production designer. I worked my way up through the ranks, and I was an on-set dresser for a couple of years, and, really understand the role of that position and how that person can really help and influence the look of it as it's being shot, and you're kind of like the production designer on set. And because I've had that position, I understand sometimes that things do change, and I give that person the freedom verbally. I say, hey, it's okay. Don't do this. This could be a problem, but you could do all of these things. If they need to shoot over here, you can move this over. And, I kind of have that covered as much as I can. It's a different thing. I'm usually someplace else designing something else or overseeing something else or building,
You kind of let the kids play in your sandpit, basically, because you've created it and you've given them the toys to sort of go do their thing.
Yeah, good analogy.
Straight off the top of my head, I feel very smart now. Thank you. I probably already know the answer to this, but I think I might ask it anyway.
Mhm.
What was your favorite set design? I have a feeling that it's going to be Death's house.
Oh yeah, Hell in Death's House, absolutely. It was the most fun. Yeah, because it's just cool. It's just cool and it's funny. I mean, he builds this mid-century house, midlife crisis type of house that looks like, it's based on the Stahl house that's up in the hills above, I think, West Hollywood. It's on the side of a hill. It's got this vista, so it's a house with a view. He builds it into the rock, but it's built from wood. And, all of those wood surfaces in the movie are burnt, like literally they are cracked and burnt. And, who does that? Like, why would you build a house out of wood in hell? So that's part of the funny.
I didn't think about that actually. That's
Yeah,
like,
I
it's
mean,
like
it's not going to last too long. So, and maybe that's the intention. You know what I'm saying? It's like there's a koi pond that they cross over to get to the front door. It's filled with lava. It's just all this goofy stuff. The burnt piano, because, the piano is made of wood. William Sadler did a on-set little video where somebody was shooting him and he's walking around his house talking about his house and the things that are in it. And he actually said, and I think this is brilliant, I didn't think about it. He goes, oh, that's John Lennon's piano, because it's the big white grand piano. And, and I love that. We put a lot of stuff in there, and that was kind of the idea. It's like, what's the subtext of all this? I, in some ways, based it off of the movie The Party, Peter Sellers' movie that came out in 1968. And his character in that film gets mistakenly invited to a Hollywood producer's party in a mid-century house. And the house is super cool and, had a little river running through and very modern. And Peter Sellers messes it up very badly because he's kind of this fumbling guy. Anyway, I love the house in that movie. And that was part of the inspiration for this. But, just also, what would he, he's also his life, which I think is funny when you're talking about death, but his life has fallen apart. He's not in a good place either. He's quit or kicked out of the band and, kind of alone down in hell. And so what's he going to do to make himself feel better? Often when things like that happen, you move out of your Gothic mansion. Done with it. I'm sick of it. I'm going to start anew. I'm going to make myself, something to reflect back to myself, like that I'm really cool and hip. And what does that look like? And so that was all of those things were the idea behind that. And it was really just to be funny. But, I do that with all the sets. I do a lot of subtext in the design, a lot of story subtext to get to whatever. I mean, in this case, it was humor. I've done horror movies. So then there would be to be scary or make you feel uneasy or whatever it is, I have to, it's not just an aesthetic thing for me. That's the end result. I'm always going from story and character and trying to build some kind of subtext there so that it all has meaning and it all has purpose and it's not just some kind of random visual thing. I think things look better when you do that. And not prettier, just right,
Well, that's the thing. It's once you step into Death's house and you have the wide shot of everything, that's sort of, I guess, as a production designer, and there's basically a moment for you and your whole team to shine, because as you said, you want to, I guess that's the moment that you serve the story, that these are the items that will tell that sort of 10-second story for an audience member to be like, oh, okay, this is what's happened to him. This is what's gone on. And it does lead me to one question that I really want to know the answer to was, am I right in thinking that was a Battleships game in Death's house? Or was that just...
No, it was. I'm pretty sure. And that was my set decorator, Selena, who came up with that idea. She's really funny. All of us had input.
Okay, cool. Because I weren't sure. You kind of looked over it, and I guess there's a blink and you'll miss it kind of moment. But I was I was curious to know, and now I'm quite I'm really satisfied with that answer. I guess to wrap this up, my final question would be, well, I guess it'll be a two-parter. So the first one is, what's next for you? And because you've worked in so many different genres, what's the next genre you want to take on?
I am interviewing about a film. It's a comedy. Can't say what it is. I don't actually kind of go, what do I want to do next in terms of genre? It's just what comes up that is interesting. I definitely did not want to get typecast as a production designer. That can happen. It happens with us just like it does with actors, where you do one thing and then people go, oh, that's what that person does. And then you just do it. You can do it over and over again. I'm so the genre doesn't matter. What I'm attracted to is usually doing something I've never done before. Bill and Ted, obviously, Hell was great. The future stuff, and there's all this stuff in the past. There was a lot in that script that were things that I just hadn't had the opportunity to design yet. So that's generally what I look for in genre be damned. I mean, that's just, there's kind of tools that you apply for, a drama as opposed to a comedy, as opposed to a horror movie, as opposed to, that kind of thing. And that's just all fun to me. I mean, I want to be good at all of it.
No, that's great. No, it's good to hear that there's stuff popping up now, especially for what's going on, and fingers crossed that it's going to come through.
Yeah.
I'd just like to say thank you so much for giving up your time today, for joining me, Mel. Again, I was really happy that you managed to email me back and join me today. And I've really, really found it enjoyable and insightful. Thank you again. And Bill and Ted Face the Music is out now in cinemas and I guess on VOD in America.
Yeah, Great. It was my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast.